Welcome to Crypto 101, a first principles jargon-free course on blockchain and its impact on financial services. We are in the process of learning how cryptocurrencies mimic the properties of fiat money. In this lesson, we will learn the final step by which cryptocurrency is transferred from one blockchain address to another, namely value transfer. We will begin with the definition of value transfer. Then, we will learn about the distinction between transaction authentication and confirmation. Finally, we will cover the concepts of mempools, blocks and mining. Before proceeding further with this lesson, let us take a moment to orient ourselves on where we are. We have been learning about how cryptocurrencies mimic the four properties of currency. The property that we are currently focused on is transferability. In a previous lesson we learnt that cryptocurrencies are transferred via the three steps of initiation, authentication and value transfer. So far, we have covered initiation and authentication. Now, we will learn about value transfer. Value transfer refers to the transfer of value from source account to destination account based on the instructions embedded in a verified payment message. Let us review the flow of a payment transaction that we have reviewed so far. First, a payment message is created. Then a digital signature is generated and assigned to it. Since the creation of the payment message and its signing can be decoupled, hardware wallets can be used to store the private key and generate the signature. These steps, as we learnt earlier, does not require connectivity to the internet. Next, the payment message is broadcast to the blockchain network. Fourth, the payment message is authenticated by a majority of the nodes on the network. However, there's some other steps that must occur before value transfer can occur. These are confirmation, block verification and blockchain creation. We will begin with confirmation. Confirmation refers to the process by which a crypto payment becomes part of the official record of the blockchain through its placement in a batch of transactions. A verified transaction, as we discussed in the previous lesson, is a transaction that has been authenticated. A confirmed transaction is a transaction that is part of the official records of the blockchain. To understand the distinction between them, next, we will refer to an illustration from outside the crypto ecosystem. Consider what happens when you swipe your credit card in a store. A payment message is sent for approval from the point-of-sale terminal to the credit card issuing bank. The issuing bank is the bank that issues the credit card. This message is often transmitted by credit card networks like MasterCard and Visa. On receiving the transaction, the credit card issuing bank performs certain checks. It checks whether you have sufficient limit on your card. The issuing bank may also check for the possibility of fraud. For instance, it may check the geolocation from which the transaction is being received. If coming from an exotic foreign location, your credit card issuer may give you a call before approving the transaction. Fraud check could also include checking for unusually large amounts. The upshot is that the transaction is verified, similar to how a crypto payment is verified. When the credit card issuing bank approves the transaction, it sends an approval code to the point-of-sale terminal at the coffee shop. The whole process takes a few seconds. At this point the transaction is verified. However, it is not confirmed. If you opened your bank's app, you will see the transaction in pending status. The card company puts a hold on your account, so that your credit limit outstanding is adjusted downwards by the transaction amount. At the end of the day, the merchant submits a file that includes all transactions of the day. The file is transmitted by card networks to the various card issuing banks. To keep this simple, we can assume that the end-of-day feed from the point-of-sale terminal occurs at 9 p.m. The transactions that are sent to the issuing banks at the end of day are confirmed transactions. From that point, they are part of the official records of the bank. It is on the basis of this official record that the transfer of funds occur between card issuing banks and the banks of the merchants. There are two separate concepts we can identify from the credit card example. One is the concept of a batch. The batch refers to the collection of transactions that are updated to the official record concurrently. In our credit card example, it was all transactions that occurred on that calendar date. The second is the concept of the batch creation time. This refers to the time interval between two batches. In the credit card example, we assumed that the end-of-day feed to the issuing banks was occurring at 9 p.m. Hence, the batch creation time was 24 hours. In the blockchain, the batch is referred to as a block. The block creation time is the time interval between two blocks. In Bitcoin, it is about 10 minutes. The maximum allowable size of a block is defined as the block size limit. The size limit is usually defined in bytes of data. The block size limit is built into the blockchain network software. The original block size limit of Bitcoin was 1 megabytes of data, but since then it has expanded. Bitcoin blocks carry about 1,000 to 4,000 transactions. The block size limit has been a subject of considerable debate within the Bitcoin community and is expected to evolve with time. The discussion so far raises two questions. First, why are payments not confirmed within a few seconds of getting authenticated? A lag in minutes is better than many legacy payment systems. For instance, merchants may receive the proceeds of credit card payments 3 days after transaction approval. Check payments take time too. Given that blockchain is a new age technology, one would expect near real-time transfers between accounts. Second, even if we accepted the time lag, why not confirm records individually? Why put them into blocks? Next, we will answer these questions. The reason for lagged confirmation is fairly simple. The transaction must be propagated to different nodes via the internet and then authenticated by each node. Only verified transactions can be confirmed. It takes time for the transaction to reach all the nodes. Hence, there needs to be lag between transaction creation and transaction verification. Consider Alice, who submits a payment at 9 a.m. The payment gets authenticated at 9:05 a.m. But the next block is created at 9:10 a.m. This creates an additional delay. It is similar to a person who reaches the airplane gate but must await her boarding group to board the flight. Why not just post the transaction directly to the blockchain as soon as a transaction gets verified? Next, we will learn the logic behind the blocks. Consider 5 transactions. Each of these transactions include details like amount, source address, destination address. The details of each transaction are converted into a number using a hash function. We learned about hash functions in a prior lesson. In a blockchain setup, assume each transaction is updated to the nodes individually without being put in a block. For simplicity, we will assume 4 nodes. In our setup, each of the 4 nodes have the same exact data on the 5 transactions. Now, on one of the nodes, the data on one transaction gets corrupted. As a result, its transaction hash changes. This transaction hash doesn't appear on other nodes. Hence, this corrupted transaction is rejected. The node will eventually go back to reflecting the official blockchain record. For the above process to work, the 4 nodes must be constantly compared and synchronized. The comparison must occur at the level of an individual transaction. This requires a lot of computing capacity. Now consider a different setup. All transactions are grouped in a block. A hash is assigned to the block using the hash function. This hash is derived from all the individual transactions. Any change in the details of one transaction will change the block hash. In the block setup I just described, one of the transactions gets corrupted on one node, just as before. The hash of the parent block changes. The entire block of the corrupted node is rejected by the network. This is similar to what happened in our hypothetical transaction level scenario. But getting blocks synchronized across each node requires far less computing capacity than synchronizing at the transaction level, but it achieves the same purpose. As proceed through this course, we will infer other reasons why organizing blocks into transactions is helpful. Let us go back to our transaction flow. We have an unsubmitted transaction. Then we have an unverified transaction. Next, we have a verified transaction. Next, we have a confirmed transaction. However, a verified transaction may remain in that status till it gets into a block. The pool of verified transactions that have yet not been put into a block is called mempool. The term mempool is short for memory pool. Think of this as a waiting room. We have said that each node in the blockchain maintains an independent set of records that's synchronized with other nodes. What records are these? First, there is a record of unverified transactions. Second, as each record is verified, it is added to the mempool of that node. Finally, each node contains blocks of confirmed transactions. Now that we know what blocks are, we are ready to learn the mechanics of block creation. There are 2 questions that arise. First, how is it determined which bookkeeper gets to form a block? Thousands of transactions are being verified every minute. Each Bitcoin bookkeeper may choose a different set of transactions to put into a block. We know that in Bitcoin, one block is created every 10 minutes. So, how is it determined whose block will be accepted as the official record? Second, how is it ensured that each block is generated with a predetermined lag time? We learnt that the block creation time for Bitcoin is 10 minutes. Regardless of whether it is 5, 10 or 30 minutes, how is this enforced? To answer these questions, we need to learn about mining. We will turn to this topic next. As verified transactions flow into the mempool, a subset of nodes compete to form the next block. These node operators are called miners, and the process of confirming transactions into batches is called mining. Next, we will learn what mining actually involves. We will look at mining from the perspective of a miner. Imagine there are 5,000 unconfirmed Bitcoin transactions in the mempool on the miner's node. A miner can pick a subset of transactions subject to the maximum permissible block size. Let us assume the miner picks 2,000 transactions. This block is called a candidate block, but it has not been chosen as the official record in the blockchain yet. The Bitcoin software derives a block header which consists of some attributes about the block. The block may have many transactions, but the block header consists of only a few fields. At this point, we don't need to understand what these attributes mean except to know that if any of underlying transactions in the block is changed, the block header changes. There is one block attribute which is of interest to us. It is the nonce. Next, we will learn about this. The miner now plays a game of chance. She inputs an arbitrary number in the field called nonce, which is an abbreviation for number only used once. The other fields of the block header remain the same. Next, a hash function is applied to the nonce and the remaining block header attributes. The resulting number is called the block hash. The miner keeps repeating this with different numbers in the nonce field. We first learned about hash functions in an earlier lesson. Hash functions convert large strings of data into fixed digit numbers. These hash functions are publicly known and are not specific to cryptocurrencies. The name of the hash function used here by Bitcoin is called SHA-256. The software then checks whether the block hash is less than a specified number. This number is called the target. The miner keeps changing the nonce and repeatedly applies the hashing algorithm to the attributes of the block header. This is a pure game of chance. No skill is required. The miners are simply iterating the nonce. The golden nonce is the one which satisfies the following criteria. The block hash is less than a specified target number. The miner may need to try billions and trillions of nonce to get the golden nonce. Thousands of miners globally are playing the same game of chance. The miner who is able to guess the correct nonce first is the one whose block wins. All transactions within that block are confirmed. Any unconfirmed transactions not in that block goes into the next block formation. Mining is not a game of skill but a game of chance. Miners deploy computers that keep trying out different numbers. By deploying thousands of computers, a miner can increase her chance of winning this game of chance. Block creation time is the time interval between the formation of two blocks. As I mentioned earlier, in Bitcoin, transactions are batched every 10 minutes. While the block creation time is 10 minutes for Bitcoin, it could be different for other cryptocurrencies. Imagine a situation where the number of computers deployed for mining keeps increasing over time. In this situation, the speed with which a correct guess is made will increase because the number of guesses being made per second is increasing. But if the Bitcoin protocol wants to enforce a block creation of 10 minutes, how can it prevent people from guessing the correct nonce in say 5 minutes? This brings us to the second question we raised earlier. How is it ensured that only one block is mined every 10 minutes? After all, in a permissionless blockchain, one cannot stop more nodes from joining the network. Next, we will answer this question. The block creation time is enforced by adjusting the level of difficulty of winning the game of chance. Next, we will develop an intuitive understanding of this with an example. Imagine you are throwing 2 dice. If the sum of numbers on the 2 is less than a target number, you win. If the target was less than 13, then you will win in the first attempt. If the target was less than 10, you may take a couple of attempts. If I now said the target was 4, the number of attempts to success increases. This is similar to what happens in the Bitcoin blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain software keeps adjusting the target every 2016 blocks based on the speed of block creation observed in the previous 2016 blocks. If the speed is too slow, the difficulty level will be eased and vice versa. The mathematics behind the adjustment of target ensures a block creation time of approximately 10 minutes. We can now go back to the Bitcoin Explorer and view blocks. Let's click on the latest block. Let us give this a minute to pull up. We can see many attributes of the block on this screen, including the block number at the very top. The block hash is what is compared to the target. It needs to be less than the target. The target for this block can be derived from the numbers represented in the bits field. The target keeps getting adjusted every 2016 blocks. The field called difficulty is a measure of the difficulty of winning the game of chance. As explained earlier, the target is a number that is adjusted based on the difficulty. We can also view the nonce that was used in this winning block. Let us go back to the 2 questions we asked earlier. The first question was, how is it determined which bookkeeper gets to form a block? The answer is the miner who is first to win the game of chance. The second question was, how is it ensured that the block creation time remains the same? The answer is by adjusting the level of difficulty of winning the game of chance. This brings us to the end of this lesson. We will continue the discussion on mining in the next lesson. Review the summary of this lesson before proceeding to the next. See you shortly.